The most powerful man in professional golf right now has not had a competitive shot in years. And what he just did behind closed doors is about to change everything. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you happened in a room most people didn't even know existed. And it involves a name that still makes the entire sport hold its breath. There was a meeting, no cameras, no press, no carefully worded statement released to the media afterward. Just a closed door, a table, and a man sitting at the head of it who was never supposed to be there at all. Not a commissioner, not a billionaire, a player, Tiger Woods. And the silence in that room before he even opened his mouth said more about where professional golf is headed than any announcement the tour has made in the last decade. If that alone doesn't tell you something fundamental has broken open, keep listening, because it only gets more complicated from here. Before we go any further, if you're new here and you want to understand what's actually happening inside professional golf, not the polished version they hand to press, subscribe right now. What's coming in this video is the story nobody in the establishment wants laid out this clearly. Now let's go back to how we got here, because none of this makes sense without understanding what broke first. For years, professional golf was quietly rotting from the inside. Not loudly, not in a way that made headlines every week. Just slowly, steadily losing the thing that makes any sport worth watching. The feeling that every moment matters. The calendar had swelled to over 40 events. Prize money kept climbing, but the product kept shrinking in the minds of anyone who wasn't already a devoted follower. Casual fans couldn't tell you which tournaments were important and which ones were filler. Because honestly, the tour itself seemed confused about that. That is not a marketing failure. That is a product failure. A deep structural one that had been papered over for years with bigger numbers and louder announcements while the actual rot spread underneath. Then LIV Golf arrived. And whatever you think about LIV, what it actually did wasn't steal players. What it did was force the establishment to look directly at what it had been avoiding. The product was broken. The audience was fragmenting. The window to fix it was closing. And the people in charge had spent years choosing comfort over correction. Strategic Sports Group came in with $1.5 billion and a message that cut straight through every layer of institutional politics. Fix this or lose everything. That money did not arrive as a suggestion. It arrived as a condition. And the condition demanded new leadership, new thinking, and a willingness to make the kind of changes that would genuinely threaten the people who had grown fat and comfortable inside the old system. Brian Rolapp was brought in as CEO. His background was not golf. It was the NFL Network, building sports audiences from the ground up in a media landscape that does not wait for you to figure yourself out. He understood something that the tour's previous leadership had consistently refused to accept. Professional golf was competing for attention in a world drowning in things competing for attention, and it was losing that competition badly. His first press conference at the Tour Championship made one thing completely clear. The goal was not incremental change. His exact framing, significant change, and then he named the chairman of the committee tasked with delivering it, Tiger Woods. Let that sit for a second. Tiger has not contended at a major in years. His body has been through procedures and recoveries that would have ended most careers a long time ago. By every conventional logic of how influence works in professional sports, recent performance, physical presence, active competition, his leverage should be declining. Every year without a competitive round should reduce how seriously a boardroom takes him. Instead, Rolapp handed Tiger more structural power over professional golf than any player in the history of the sport. Not advisory, not ceremonial. The actual chairmanship of the body making the actual decisions. 6 players sat alongside him. Patrick Cantlay, Adam Scott, Camilo Villegas, Maverick McNeely, Keith Mitchell. Different generations, different relationships with tour politics. And 3 business figures chosen for one specific reason. They knew how to build things that actually worked, including Theo Epstein. That name matters more than most coverage has acknowledged. Epstein rebuilt the Chicago Cubs from a laughingstock into a dynasty. He does not attach himself to projects built for optics. His entire career has been about identifying broken systems, stripping them down, and rebuilding with a logic so clean that the old way ends up looking embarrassing in hindsight. Bringing him in wasn't about credibility. It was about method. Tiger brings the demands. Epstein, and the business minds build the frameworks to execute them. The players provide internal political cover. Rolapp stands publicly behind all of it and absorbs the heat from everyone who wants none of this to happen. That framework is why this committee was different from every player advisory group the tour had assembled before it. Previous ones advised. This one decides. And what Tiger brought to that first meeting was not a wish list brainstormed in the weeks after the announcement. It was a list built over years. Years of watching professional golf repeat the same mistakes in slightly different packaging with no one in a position to force the issue. Now he was in that position, and the list had 5 items on it. The first was a schedule. Tiger pushed to cut the primary calendar from over 30 events down to approximately 20, running from after the Super Bowl through to just before the NFL season reclaims the sports landscape. The logic was blunt. Too many tournaments dilutes everything simultaneously. Purses lose meaning. Prestige spreads too thin. Television audiences fragment across too many weeks. 20 events means every tournament carries genuine weight. Every miscut stings the way a miscut is supposed to sting. Every victory means something beyond accumulating points on a spreadsheet no fan actually follows. Tournament directors heard this and organized immediately against it, because fewer tour stops means fewer host cities, fewer title sponsors, fewer local economies built around the week the circus comes to town. The resistance was loud, coordinated, and came through every available channel. Tiger didn't touch the number, because the schedule was only the opening move. Stay right here, because what came next hit personally for the people sitting in that room with him. The second item was promotion and relegation. Tiger brought a proposal to explore a system where players earn their position or surrender it, not through a points race that rewards longevity over excellence, but through a framework modeled on elite European football. Perform at the required level or drop to the tier below. Prove you belong or make room for someone who does. For a sport that had spent decades protecting a comfortable middle class, players making very good livings finishing between 15th and 30th every week without ever threatening to win. This was a direct and personal threat. The reaction from that segment was quiet, coordinated, and persistent. Elite players read it completely differently. A system rewarding excellence and punishing stagnation is a system built for the people at the top, the ones who win, the ones who compete, the ones who give the product its actual value. The silence that fell in that room after this one landed wasn't confusion. It was comprehension. Everyone at the table understood exactly which half of the locker room it was aimed at. Tiger looked at the framework protecting players who hadn't threatened to win in years, and he decided it had to go. The room went quiet because removing that framework meant naming something nobody had been willing to name out loud before. The third item was player equity. Following the strategic sports group investment, tour players have received ownership stakes for the first time in the organization's history. Tiger's position was straightforward. Expand it. Grow the player ownership stake until players are genuine partners in the business they are building, not contracted talent performing for an institution that profits from their excellence while they hold no stake in the underlying asset. Players who own a piece of what they create have a fundamentally different relationship with it. They market it differently. They protect it differently. They show up differently because it belongs to them in a way that actually means something. Tiger had spent his entire career generating billions in value for an organization in which he held no ownership. He wasn't raising this for himself. He was raising it for every player who would inherit whatever framework this committee managed to build. This one moved through the room relatively quickly. The fourth item did not. Lifetime achievement exemptions. Tiger had already received a specific provision allowing him to compete in all signature events regardless of standard qualifying criteria. His push was to formalize it, to create a codified policy that would protect verified legends of the sport from being quietly squeezed out of the events that define the season through administrative criteria they can no longer meet physically. The pushback arrived from multiple directions. Younger players and their representatives asked the obvious question: who defines legend? Where does the threshold sit? Who makes the call when someone is close, but not quite there? The potential for political manipulation was visible to everyone who raised it. Tiger's answer was to insist on objective, clearly defined criteria established in advance and applied without deviation. Golf's history belonged on the course alongside its future, not archived in highlight reels while the people who built the product were quietly pushed out the back door. The argument made sense in principle. It never does once the people deciding the criteria are also the ones with something to gain from drawing the line in a particular place. And then the fifth item, the one that sounds small and is anything but shorts. Tiger Woods has been pushing for tour players to wear shorts in professional competition for longer than most current tour members have held their cards. Against schedule restructuring and relegation frameworks, it sounds minor. It is not. Shorts are the most visible and persistent symbol of a circuit that has spent decades choosing tradition over logic, comfort over common sense. Fans wear shorts at every event. Caddies now with them on the course. Every amateur golfer in every country plays in them, without a second thought. Tour professionals in summer heat, on courses baking under television lights for 5 hours a day, are required to wear trousers because that is what has always been required. Full stop, no further explanation offered or expected. Tiger raised this specifically because of what the resistance to it reveals. If this institution cannot change something that costs nothing, affects nobody, and has no logical defense beyond habit, what does that actually say about its appetite for the harder items on the list? The committee noted it. The broader institutional response was exactly what anyone who has watched this organization operate would have predicted. Silence. 5 items on the table. A committee built to force them through. A CEO who had publicly handed Tiger the mandate to make significant change happen. By late 2025, professional golf was standing at the edge of the most consequential transformation it had faced in 30 years. And then everything stopped at once. Jupiter Island, Florida. Late at night, a rollover car accident. Tiger Woods, chairman of the Future Competition Committee, the man carrying the entire reform agenda, was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence. His statement was short. He was stepping away from golf indefinitely, focusing on his health, entering treatment. The tour confirmed in careful language that he would return to his committee role when ready. When ready. 2 words that landed across professional golf like a door closing on something that hadn't finished yet. The schedule hadn't been cut. The relegation framework hadn't been locked in. The equity expansion was still being structured. The exemption policies remained unresolved. Shorts, still unaddressed. 5 items, all mid-process. And the one man with the mandate and the leverage to force any of them across the finish line had just left the room. The people who had been quietly resisting Tiger's agenda didn't celebrate. They understood something more uncomfortable than victory. A power vacuum had opened at the exact moment the sport most needed someone applying pressure. Without Tiger in the chair, the locked doors don't disappear. They just stop being forced open. Here is what I actually believe will happen, and I want you to hear this clearly before I finish. I think the establishment runs a clock. I think the people who wanted incremental change, exactly what Rolapp said he didn't want, are already doing what establishments do best. Waiting, letting the urgency drain out of the room, letting the momentum dissipate. And I think when Tiger eventually walks back into that meeting, he will find all 5 items exactly where he left them, untouched, with everyone insisting they were protecting the list for his return. Whether these 5 reforms actually survive this gap, whether the institution has the courage or the honesty to finish what Tiger started without him forcing it, none of that is resolved. The committee still exists. Epstein is still involved. Rolapp has not reversed course publicly. But the difference between a reform agenda driven by Tiger Woods and one managed by a committee operating without him is not a small difference. It is the entire difference. Professional golf is holding its breath right now, and the old guard is exhaling for the first time in 2 years. Do you think these 5 reforms survive without him? Or does the circuit quietly bury them and call it patience? Tell me exactly where you stand in the comments, because this conversation is far from over. And if you want to be here when this story moves, and it will move, hit subscribe. The next chapter of this is already in motion.